Hello, warriors. This is your friend, the assassin from Assassin Evolution, back with another hard-hitting episode. Today we've brought in a true legend, a god of strength and discipline, Kratos from God of War. In today's podcast, he'll be sharing his powerful insights on breaking free from porn addiction, regaining control, and mastering our inner battles. Get ready to tap into the wisdom of a warrior and reclaim your path to strength and self-mastery. Let's dive into it.
Thank you, Assassin, for inviting me. I've fought countless battles, faced gods and monsters, but some of the toughest wars we fight are the ones within ourselves. Addiction is no different. It's a battle that tests our discipline and will. Today, I'm here to help guide those who are ready to reclaim their strength and break free from the struggle.
All right, let's get into it. This is the real talk, straight from the God of War himself. Let's break it down and conquer this battle once and for all. Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling a topic that's often kind of brushed under the rug. It's porn addiction, and we're going to be looking at the insights of entrepreneur Elias Nash, who very bravely shared his story on the TED stage.
Yeah, I was so struck by his story, particularly because of how he starts out with just laying out the statistics of it all.
Yeah, like it really hits you right between the eyes.
It does. 40 million adults in the U.S. regularly visit porn sites.
That's a lot of people.
It is, and 1 in 5 mobile searches is porn-related.
It really does you see the numbers and it's like, oh wow, this is a big, pervasive problem.
And one thing that he brought up that I thought was really interesting was this idea from this organization, Fight the New Drug. They actually consider internet porn a new drug.
And it makes you think about what is it about something that makes it a drug? And you start to see the parallels, right? You have that accessibility.
Yeah, you have the dopamine rush. You have the fact that you build up a tolerance, and then you might experience withdrawal.
But here's what's, I think, the most interesting part of it all when it comes to internet porn. It's designed to be hyper-stimulating.
That's true. So it's not just like, I'm gonna look at this one thing. It's multiple tabs. It's constant novelty. It's pushing the boundaries further and further.
And so your brain is just bombarded with stimulation.
Yeah, and I think that also kind of plays into the shame factor because one of the things that Elias was really open about was that he hid his addiction for 5 years, even while he was going to therapy.
Can you imagine the pressure for someone as successful as him?
Yeah, to finally open up about that.
Absolutely, and I think that speaks to how much stigma there is around this particular addiction.
For sure. People are afraid to get help because what are people going to think? And because of that silence, I think a lot of people just stay in it, even though there are really effective ways to get help.
Absolutely. And another thing that he really kind of challenged was this idea that porn consumption is all about sexual desire.
Right, like he told a story about a young man who said, "Oh, it's just a guy thing. Boys will be boys." But when they actually started talking, it became clear that this guy was using porn to cope with stress and emotional turmoil.
It's so interesting how we tend to find ways to numb out.
Absolutely, to avoid dealing with things that are difficult, right? But the problem is those emotions are still there.
They don't go away.
They don't go away. They get stronger, and they're not dealt with.
And so you kind of have to look at it from this perspective of like a quick fix versus the long-term cost.
Yeah, what are you sacrificing by taking that shortcut?
Exactly. And that actually leads really well into kind of the impact this can have on relationships, which is something that Elias didn't shy away from at all.
He told this really eye-opening story about a porn star who had a complete change of perspective after she caught her boyfriend watching porn.
Oh, I think that story was so insightful because it really shows how porn can completely warp our expectations.
Oh, sure. Here she is doing this professionally, and she realizes what I'm doing is not what people should be looking at and basing their expectations on. This is a performance.
Yeah, this is something that's supposed to be hyper-stimulating, but it's not real, right?
It's not real life.
It's not real life.
And so it really does make you think about, what's the disconnect between this fantasy world that porn creates, and then you try to bring that into a real relationship?
Exactly, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, it just doesn't translate.
It just doesn't translate. It's like they're speaking two completely different languages.
And it's interesting too because, he was talking about how some men actually see porn as like an education.
Yeah. He brought up this interview with Pamela Anderson where she was talking about how some men expect sex to be like it is in porn.
Oh gosh, and that can lead to so much pressure and disappointment in real-life encounters.
And it's like they're getting the completely wrong idea.
Yeah, and maybe think about it. If someone's primary education about sex is coming from porn, then they're missing out on all of those crucial elements, right?
Like the communication.
Yeah, the consent.
Yeah, the emotional connections that make up healthy intimacy.
I always say it's like trying to learn how to swim while watching Olympic divers.
I love that.
You know, you might pick up a few things here and there, but you're not getting the full picture, right?
You're not actually getting in the water.
You're not getting in the water and experiencing it.
Exactly. And he also mentioned that he gets messages from women who are struggling with porn addiction.
You know, it's interesting because we always hear about men struggling with this, but the reality is it affects people of all genders.
And I think we don't talk enough about the prevalence of porn addiction in women.
Yeah, for sure. And it made me think about how, he was talking about being willing to do whatever it takes to recover.
Yeah, and he talked about hitting rock bottom, feeling completely lost and hopeless.
Yeah, and it was that desperation that made him actually seek help, right?
You almost have to get to that point sometimes to really make a change.
Yeah, there's no shame in reaching out for support at any time, at any stage in your journey.
Absolutely, you don't have to wait until you're at your lowest point to get help.
Yeah, about his struggles. He talked about opening up to his therapist, joining a 12-step program.
Exactly, and that's what's so inspiring about his story is that he was so honest.
I love that anecdote he told about his business partner who literally helps people tell their stories for a living.
Yeah, even confiding in his business partner.
I know, like he didn't know what to say.
That's right. And when Elias told him that he wanted to do a TED Talk about porn addiction, he was speechless.
Yes, breaking down those barriers. And he didn't just talk about, the importance of seeking help.
Yeah, because it's just so taboo, and Elias really had this commitment to breaking down those barriers.
Yeah, like therapy, support groups, even technology tools like Covenant Eyes.
He actually gave specific tools and strategies that worked for him.
For sure. Therapy gives you that safe space to explore those underlying issues, right?
I think each of those things plays a really important role.
Support groups offer a sense of community and accountability.
The things that might be contributing to the addiction.
Yeah, but it's about how do we give them the tools and the knowledge to navigate it all.
And then you have technology tools like filters and blockers, which can be super helpful in managing triggers and creating that pause between the urge and the action.
I thought it was interesting how he emphasized that even filters and blockers. Oh yeah, they're not fruitful. No, he talked about how they can be really helpful in the early stages of recovery. Right, but ultimately, it's about addressing those deeper emotional and psychological factors. Absolutely, it's like putting a band-aid on a broken bone. It might cover it up for a little bit, but it's not actually dealing with the root of the problem. He's not gonna fix it. And for Elias, that man really digging deep in therapy, understanding his triggers, developing those healthier coping mechanisms. Yeah, building a strong support network. And that kind of leads into what I thought was one of the most powerful parts of his talk. Yeah, which was his interaction with his nephew. Oh, do you remember how the nephew saw the Porn Kills Love t-shirt and innocently asked, "What's porn?" Oh my gosh, I got chills when he told that story. Me too, because it's such a powerful moment. It really forced him to confront the reality that even young children are exposed to this these days. Yes, and it really highlighted for me the need to have open and honest conversations. Absolutely, about sex and relationships, even when it feels uncomfortable. It's not about trying to shield kids from the world, because that's impossible, especially these days. Absolutely, about sex and relationships, even when it feels uncomfortable. Absolutely, yeah, and create that safe space where they feel comfortable asking questions.
Exactly, having those open conversations.
And that brings us back to something that Elias said that really stuck with me.
Okay.
He talked about this idea that porn addiction leads to pushing boundaries.
Yeah, going from pixels to people.
Yeah, going from pixels to people.
Isn't that chilling?
Well, that's chilling.
You start seeking out more intense, more extreme content online, and that can spill over.
Well, that's chilling.
In the real world.
Yeah, because it really highlights the potential for this to escalate, right?
Absolutely. Where violence becomes normalized.
Absolutely, into how you view and treat people in the real world.
Yeah, we're talking about real people.
It's that whole desensitization thing, right? Like you see it in video games.
And so I think that makes the shame factor even more dangerous.
Yeah, and the consequences seem less real. But in this case,
And it makes you think, like, how many other people are out there struggling in silence?
right, real relationships and real consequences.
Yeah. So we really need to kind of shift the conversation.
For sure, because think about it, Elias spent 5 years in therapy without mentioning his porn addiction, even though it was a huge part of his life.
Right. Recognizing that this is a complex issue with very real consequences, and it's not just about willpower.
Absolutely, because they're afraid of being judged. Stigma, the consequences.
You know, we need to create a space for healing.
Yes, shift the conversation, you know, from judgment to empathy.
And I think it's also important to remember the ripple effects.
Right, like I'll just stop. It's so much more than that. It's so much deeper than that.
Absolutely. Elias was very open about how his addiction really strained his marriage.
Absolutely, and recovery.
It's so powerful.
Yes, that this can have on relationships.
Sure.
But he also talked about how his recovery actually became a source of strength for their relationship.
Absolutely. Through honesty, vulnerability.
It is, because it shows that even though addiction can really damage relationships.
And I think that brings up a good point, that it's not just about individual healing, right?
It's possible to rebuild.
And you know what I thought was really inspiring was that Elias didn't just talk about the problem.
Yeah, and a commitment to growth. It's about relational healing as well.
Absolutely. He didn't just rely on therapy, right? He used technology like Covenant Eyes to help stay accountable.
Yeah, he talked about his solution.
So it's about finding what works for you.
He found support in 12-step programs.
Yeah, recovery is not linear.
Absolutely, and being willing to try different things and being patient with the process.
Right. Keep moving forward.
Absolutely not. There are going to be setbacks. There are going to be challenges, but it's about not giving up.
Absolutely. So let me wrap up this deep dive.
Keep moving forward. Keep seeking support.
He hasn't watched porn for 4.5 years.
I want to leave you with this final thought. Telias was able to break free from this addiction.
Right. You know, maybe it's time to break the silence.
If he can do it, what's possible for you? Or maybe there's someone in your life who needs to hear this conversation.
Yeah, head on.
Yeah, reach out for help, or just start talking more openly.
Absolutely. Heed on.
It's about facing our challenges, seeking support, and creating a life that's authentic and connected. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you some things to think about, and maybe